I want to backtrack a little bit to the last Warlord album, because one, it was one of my favorite albums of the year last year. But I remember it's so funny how everybody that I know especially people that without Bill thought it was not going to be good, and it ended up being very good, and it got a lot of praise from most people. Talk about that a little bit because you
Well,
guys put
in a sense,
yeah,
people say without Bill, but that's Bill's music. I mean,
correct.
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it was my lyrics for the most part, my vocal melodies for the most part, but
Hmm.
every piece of music, take away the vocals, take away the vocal melodies. If it was an instrumental album, everything you're hearing there is Bill's composition. Whether it was a riff, 8-bar riff that we put together with another 8-bar riff, and those two work together well. And no, there's a chorus over here that would fit in there. And
Yeah.
or if it was something that he had written top to bottom, boom, because there was a few of them. Or if it was something there's two songs that he did for Lordy and Guard, Behold a Pale Horse, and the a Revelation. So it's all Bill's music. So it's Bill was there, and we even used some of his guitar tracks, obviously, as well. And then Eric
Hmm.
played very, 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 very faithfully to Bill's demos. And to say it's without Bill, well, that's doing him a huge disservice because compositionally, that was his music.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I just remember there was some backlash, but
Yeah,
now
yeah.
I think the album, I mean, I haven't really seen anything negative about it. I mean, how was the reception to that album
There is
for you
there is
guys?
a small and it is overwhelmingly positive response that humbled me and blew me away. I couldn't
Sure.
believe it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I thought if we had 40% of people on side, that would be a win. I'm telling you, it was almost unanimous. I mean, people were writing me apologizing, saying like, wow, I'm sorry that I thought this was going to be like a horrible record.
Hmm.
There is a small, very, very faithful, and I don't really blame them because they're very faithful to Bill. There is a small collective of diehards, and it's probably about 50 people
Hmm.
who didn't want to like this, didn't like this, will never like this, and will never say anything good about this record. This record could, come to life and do somersaults and whatever, and they would still say, no, it's rubbish.
Yeah.
There's a very small collective that, it's like people that think that Riot shouldn't be Riot without Mark Reale.
Hmm.
Most people love what Riot do now, but there is still that little, cluster of detractors. So we've got a couple of them, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But I'm telling you, like 98%, 99%, I couldn't believe it. It's just so many. I rang Jimmy and I said, look, I'm struggling to find a bad review here. Because I sometimes I read the bad ones because they're kind of like, sometimes they're entertaining. It's kind of funny, because I've got a very self-effacing sense of humor. So I'm like, there's got to be a bad one here somewhere. Someone that just trashes us,
Sure.
And I couldn't find one. So I'm like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah. I couldn't find a bad review on it either. So once in a while, I get curious because when that album was basically like announced, I was kind of like, there was a kind of a mixed reaction to it.
Oh, yeah.
And you remember the mixed reaction. Then you put out the emails, and then between you and Bill, and that kind of went down a little bit. But once it came out, it was like I didn't see any of that. I mean,
And I got loads more emails that go into great detail.
I'm sure, yeah.
And
No.
but I'm not. I don't. I put out a couple. Me and Mark put out a couple just as a.
Yeah.
I don't. We don't need to start publishing 50 emails from Bill just to justify what we're doing. Where Bill goes into like deep private stuff, and explicitly says to carry on. And people would be surprised what's in those emails. It would turn the whole thing on its head in the sense of like,
I'm sure,
of even what Warlord is and was, and Bill would be the first to say how important Mark Zonda is to Warlord and the Warlord sound. So
yeah,
I mean, I'm not I'm not going to start sharing like every piece of private correspondence me and Bill had to try and justify what we're doing. We shared a couple of things that made it clear. We stated our intentions, our love for Bill, for the legacy of the band, for keeping his music out there. Because how many people are talking about Sabotage now?
a lot.
Versus how many people were talking about Sabotage this time last year.
Mm-hmm.
This time last year, Sabotage were just a really good band that if you were kind of like, if you're into metal, you know about Sabotage. Now there's people discovering Sabotage because there's this buzz about their upcoming shows, and we don't have either Oliva brother involved in these shows. Obviously, sadly, we lost Chris. It's 33 years ago, 32 years ago, and wow, time flies. And then John is
93, if I remember
93,
correctly,
and John is unwell and can't be there, which is unfortunate. And I hope he's okay, or he's going to be okay. But you look at the lineup. Okay, who's the most recent addition to that lineup? Al Petrelli joined in like 95.
Yeah, 94, 90. I think 95. Yeah, Dead Winter Dead.
95. So the most recent dude in the band has been there for 30 years. The next most recent dude was probably Jeff Plate. He joined in like 93. And then, so that's like 32 years. And then the next most recent dude joined in 92, and that's Zach, the lead singer of like 4 or 5 records.
Yeah. Who was personally picked by John, by the way.
Who was personally picked by John. John is obviously involved in everything that's going to happen on that stage.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can it not be Sabotage? It's like Johnny Lee Middleton's been, and Caffrey, he was in and out, but, he was on the Mountain King tour. Johnny Lee Middleton joined on the Fight for the Rock. I mean, we're getting into 40 years here. I mean, this is okay, they're not original members, but I mean, it's pretty close, you know what I mean? It's so I've heard some detractors, no John Oliva, no Sabotage, but yeah, the songs are going to show up every night, aren't they? And they were written by John and Chris.
Yeah,
and how can it be a tribute band when you've got guys of like 30-year tenures, 40-year tenures in the band?
Yeah, I remember the tribute band accusations for them. I recorded an episode. So just so you know, the first band I ever met, like actual real like known band, was this lineup of Sabotage plus John.
Yeah,
and that was 27 years ago. It was right before I started my show, and I actually was carting Chris and John around Cleveland for a little bit. But the thing is, these guys have been, here's how I look at it. I look at it the same way that I look at the whole, Pantera reunion, or, what we were talking about with Sabotage is that, do you want the music to be out there and played live or not? I mean, to me, these songs deserve to be played live. And if you're going to go out and play these songs live, it might as well be with the guys that were brought into the band in the mid 90s. And that's how I look at that.
And it's like, it's sanctioned by like the original dudes.
Exactly.
Or the estate. I mean, look at Magnum. They've just had this triumphant run of tribute shows to Tony.
Mm-hmm.
And people are saying, like, they're like, wow, I feel bad saying this, but this is one of my favorite Magnum shows I've ever seen.
Yeah.
What is the harm? Who's going to get hurt? Okay, so this great music, Sabotage, Magnum, Warlord, Foreigner, this great music and these great songs are going to be played in front of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands even people, and they will, and inevitably reaching ears that have never heard them before.
Right.
What is the harm? Who's getting hurt? What is the disadvantage? I don't understand. If you don't personally wish to, and I get it, if you go, well, okay, the reason I loved band X is because of band member Y. They're not there anymore, therefore I have no use for band X. Great. I get it. I feel the same way about one or two artists myself. So I choose not to go. But if 6,000 people in a venue somewhere are having a great time listening to it, there's no harm. No one's getting hurt. It's like, it doesn't, I just don't know why people have to react so negatively, like you're kind of like destroying their fairy tale or something. It seems so strange to me.
Yeah. But it's funny you say that. I said that about the Sabotage thing. I said the same thing about Pantera, even though you don't have the Abbott brothers. Again, you have the guy that sang all the songs that really were big for them. And then you have two guys who are seasoned musicians, and Zakk Wylde and Charlie Benante, who were not only a fan of the music, but they were friends with these dudes. So it's not like they're not going to put in the effort to make the shows good. So
you make a good point. They got Phil Anselmo, the guy who sang on those records. Well, is that not good enough? So by saying that, you're saying that, like, okay, well, if it was the other way around, you took Phil out, and there was like, let's just say in an alternate universe, it was like Vinnie Paul Dimebag, and then a different guy replacing Phil, and a guy replacing Rex.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you'd still be saying, well, that ain't Pantera. There's no Phil.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So take your pick. Now there is a Phil. So it's, again, I think a lot of people, people don't like change. But to be so negative and down on something that's doing well, what people don't realize in this business, and some people realize it, but a lot of people don't, is an active entity, a band, a show, creates far more opportunities for the music than a dormant entity.
Correct.
It creates licensing opportunities, merchandising opportunities, catalog opportunities, synchronization. Songs getting used in video games and films, and just being out there, living and breathing in a real way. Has an active entity representing that music, whether it be a band with one original member, no original members, and a bunch of guys that have been in the band a long time, or whatever. I mean, think about Riot. If Riot had just died after Immortal Soul, their catalog would be collecting dust right now.
Mm-hmm.
There would be Rock Candy reissuing a couple of the records, Metal Blade, whatever, but there's a lot less willingness for a label to do that if there's no one out there touring, representing it and promoting it. So catalogs tend to just fade away. And, obviously if you've got an evergreen catalog like the Creedence Clearwater Revival or Beatles, it's a little bit different. But, for our genre of music, for bands that were not like that, those bands I just mentioned, you got to have someone out there kind of flying the flag for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates more opportunities for that music to live on throughout into the future.
Right. Another band that falls under the category we were talking about that people have kind of stopped complaining about, band on Brave Words Records, Crimson Glory. As soon as they heard Travis Wills sing, those songs, that whole thing of, no Midnight, no Crimson Glory, no John Drenning, no Crimson Glory, kind of went out the window, and people don't realize there's 3 original guys in the band.
Queensryche. I mean, the Queensryche was an interesting one because Jeff Tate had made himself. And again, I wasn't there. I didn't see what really happened. I didn't see I have no reason to disbelieve the story the Queensryche guys have stated.
Yeah.
I have no reason to disbelieve anything Jeff Tate said. I wasn't there. But it appeared from the outside that Jeff Tate had made himself so unpopular that this was an interesting one. The direction the music had taken was being so poorly received that he was almost like, when he pushed out the door, when Rising West was announced, people were like, yeah, we've got our Queensryche back. That was kind of the same in reverse. It was people were so overjoyed they'd got a new singer. And then it took a couple of years. Then a couple of years later, some of the detractors sort of entered the picture. But I remember when that was first kind of announced, people were like, no more records like dedicated to chaos, bring it on, And I think Todd's just done such a wonderful job, fronting that band.
He has.
Yeah.
And, they've put out pretty solid albums.
Has every one they've put out been a classic on par with like The Warning and all that? No.
Mm-hmm.
But they're very, very good albums. And I thought the last one, that came real close. That was like, now we're talking. That's a great record. That's a great record.
That's probably the best album they've put out with him in the band, to be honest.
And then there's been some really good songs like I thought the 2013 album was pretty solid. And I thought that there was a song called Bulletproof that I thought was really good.
Yeah.
Off what's the one with the little girl standing on the stool reaching up? Conditioned Human.
Yeah.
That one. Yeah. And there's been some real cool music come out from that lineup. And I thought the last album was like where that lineup really was like, boom, there we go.
Hey everybody, Tony here from the Metal Command podcast. Again, I appreciate your support. Since 1998, I have hosted this show in one form or another, starting off in radio and now in the podcast format. Again, thanks for watching, and if you like what you see and hear on this show, by all means, please hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified anytime I do post a video, and if you see this program on any other form of social media, please give me a follow there. Again, I always appreciate your support.